Hello and welcome to yet another video, and in this video it is something a little bit different than usual because in this video I'll be talking about this lens right here. It's the Samyang 85mm f1.4. Yes, it's been out for a while, the Mark II is also out, but the Mark I is still on sale and it's much cheaper than when it first came out. And because I've been using this lens for the past 2-ish years now, I feel like it's kind of a good time to actually share about this lens with you all. So in this video, it's not going to be a full review video of this lens. There are a plethora of those on the internet already, and I'm just going to be giving you guys pretty much my thoughts on this lens based on how I used it. So yeah, in hopes it might actually help some of you out. So without further ado, let's get into the video. So the Samyang 85mm f1.4. Now this lens has been out for quite a while now, I know, and despite being out for quite a while now and also having the Mark II out, this lens, in my opinion, is still a very good lens to get. And whether if you're, using it for professional work or personal work, the results you get out of this lens is still quite nice, in my opinion. And in this video, as mentioned earlier, it's not going to be a full review video, but rather just me giving you guys my opinion about, having used this lens for the past 2 years, and also telling you where, I'm coming from with using this lens. So in this video, I'll be dividing into 3 different sections as usual. The first section is going to be about the operational side of things, the build quality, the ergonomics, then leading down into the image quality, and then into my conclusion. So let's first start with the first section, which is the ergonomics and the operational side of things. So this lens is actually built mostly out of metal. It also comes with the plastic lens hood, which is actually very nice. Inside it is a bit matte so that it doesn't reflect light into the glass as well, so that's actually pretty good. The actual lens itself though is very light for an 85-1.4, I have to say. Like, it feels very hollow inside, but in the same time it's mostly made out of metal, so it does feel very solid. Even the grip here for the focus ring, it is made out of metal, and that's actually quite a nice touch as well, though it's not so pleasant when you're using it in on a winter day, for example, because it actually gets very cold. And the positive side of having this metal ring here is after a while of using it, unlike rubber rings, it doesn't expand and get loose. You'll just have the same grip over and over again, whereas with the rubber rings, especially in this price range, usually after a few years the rubber gets a little bit more kind of loosened up, or the color kind of faded a little bit, depending on how you use the lenses, of course. But yeah, this particular focus ring is actually very good. And talking about the focus ring, it actually has a very huge focus throw, so that actually is the benefit if you want to focus everything super accurately. So yeah, there's that. But for autofocusing system, this lens has a very accurate autofocusing system. That being said, if you're planning to use it for certain wildlife, let's say shooting birds, which is something I like to shoot sometimes with this lens at the beach, then the autofocusing system cannot always keep up, especially with the A7 IV that I have it mounted on right here. Usually it can't really keep up with the pace of the seagulls if you're shooting at f1.4, but if you're stopping it down to around f2.8, that's when the hit rate from around less than 10% jumps up to around just under 25 or 30%. And if you're using f4, then it's going to be slightly above 50% of a hit rate. But if you're shooting with portrait subjects, for example, where they're not moving nowhere near as fast as seagulls flying across you, then it's going to get around over 95% accuracy in autofocusing system, especially in continuous autofocusing system as well. So that's actually a huge benefit. And when you're focusing with this lens in autofocus mode, there is noise. For video, you will be able to pick it up, but it's very silent. You will just hear a little bit of a hiccup, that's all. But otherwise, in terms of the autofocusing noise, it's mostly silent. You don't really get disturbed by it. You can actually focus inside a super quiet place like a library or a wedding hall, and no one will be distracted by the autofocusing sound of this lens. But the autofocusing system, depending on the subject, it's mostly a great autofocusing system to have, assuming you're going to be focusing around higher than f2. At around f1.4, it will hunt a little bit here and there, but in most cases, especially with humans, it's going to be okay. But with animals, that's hit and miss sometimes, mostly miss though. But yeah, but when it's miss, it's only like a hair away. So if you just do a tiny bit of sharpening and also only post it on social media like Instagram, no one will really notice that it's out of focus by a hair unless if they really zoom in. So there is that. It is still somewhat accurate, just the motor can't always keep it up at f1.4, so just keep that in mind. But otherwise, this lens actually has really nice weather sealing around it as well. It has the basic weather sealing, and there is a tiny rubberized gasket around the actual mount and the lens barrel itself, but there's no gaskets extending that would cover the mount of the camera and the mount of the lens. So when you do take out this lens onto, let's say, a light rain day, so to speak, then you can kind of get away with the light rain. But if it's starting to get heavier, just be careful. I mean, the lens will survive, the camera will definitely survive, but it could slowly make its way down between the gaps of the lens and the camera mount. So just keep that in mind, because I had something similar happen to my Fuji system where on a heavy rain, even though the lens I had on there was a fully weather sealed Fuji lens, but the rain was heavy enough that it made its way through. And I can see it also happening with this particular combo, that if I do use this on a rainy day, on a super downpour day, then the watch will get kind of into the mount, but not into the sensor. But that is something to look out for. But it's still good that you still can take this lens to photograph in like light rain conditions, sandy condition, super cold or super warm condition, because of that basic weather sealing. So that's actually pretty good. This lens is also pretty light. Despite being really light lens, it is still quite big, well, thick rather. So when you're actually putting this lens inside the camera bag, you will definitely know that the lens is there, not from the weight, but just from the size of it. So just keep that in mind. But in the same time, you know, this lens, the weight is very light. You will still be able to put other lenses in your camera bag without, you know, hurting your back so much. So yeah, that's about it. And now moving on to the image quality part. The image quality out of this lens is actually pretty nice. I really love the image quality out of this lens, whether you're shooting directly against the light source or you're just photographing, you know, against a really harsh contrast situation. This lens is able to handle things very well. Of course, at f1.4, you will still see a bit of color fringing, which is easily corrected later in post, especially, you know, with just a few clicks here and there. But in the same time, the sharpness is something that I was really impressed with from this lens, especially if you're looking the price from this lens nowadays at around 550 euros. The chromatic aberration, the color fringing, the sharpness, overall contrast control at f1.4, it is very, very impressive. You know, it's actually even better than back in the DSLR days on some of the 85mm that cost nearly $1,000, and their performance on contrast situation and also on the color fringing side of things, you know, isn't as good as this lens. And this lens, it really came a long way from those days, and I feel like even, you know, at this class you will still be able to use it for professional work. Now, my background is for all of my professional work and a lot of my personal work, I tend to use my favorite RF 85mm f1.2. This is the beast, and this is my go-to 85mm, but on rare occasions that I do use my Sony system for photography, I also use the 85.4 Samyang, and that's why I went for the Samyang option and not the Sony option, because for my main stuff and also for a lot of my personal stuff, I already have the Canon for it, so I couldn't justify paying the extra money for the Sony system. And to be honest, I'm not regretting. The image quality out of this lens is great. Yes, you will see the vignetting as well at f1.4, and it gets better at around f2.8. And if you're shooting anything landscape, you know, it gets really good at f8 to around f11 or f14, depending on which lighting condition and depending on the distance of the subject that you're focusing on. But, you know, for cityscapes, for basic snaps here and there, it is a very sharp lens. Just at f1.4, it is just sharp enough, like decently sharp at f1.4 in the center, and the corner just loses the sharpness a little bit. But otherwise, you know, as a portrait photographer or someone who mainly shoots portrait, I feel like I don't really mind having the corner a little bit soft, because it does kind of help me, or help the image, you know, pull the attention more into the sensor or more into the middle ground of the image where usually the subjects would be, and usually at the corners where, you know, things would just kind of go out into the vignetting part, getting a bit soft. So the characteristics out of this lens is actually kind of helping my own aesthetics on how I shoot portraits as well, so I'm definitely not complaining about that. But yeah, otherwise the contrast control also gets better after f2.8 and even much better after f4. So if you're using this lens for like cityscapes and basic street photography here and there and something that's outside portrait shoot, you will definitely enjoy using this lens above f4. For portrait work though, as I mentioned earlier, if you like to shoot with f1.4, I think the vignetting, it is there and you will see it. It's not that strong, but it is really there, and the color fringing is also there, but it's in the same time super easy to correct, and it's definitely not distracting at all, and the vignetting will actually help to add mood into the portrait, in my opinion, and with the way I shoot. So yeah, there is that. But otherwise, there's no weird lens flaring. Like the lens flare situation with this lens, you will still see it, but it's not distracting, and the color that's coming out of the lens flare looks more natural rather than, you know, weird distracting lens flare that you see on some of Sony's lenses. So that is something I really appreciate out of this lens. And when there is lens flare, it doesn't take too much of the image that it takes your attention away from the subject, so that's also pretty good, and the contrast on the rest of the image is still quite good for the class of this lens. So yeah, there's that. Overall, I actually really highly recommend this lens for the image quality as well, and I really have no bad things to really say about it, because you have to take into consideration about the price point as well, that it's actually pretty affordable. And if you buy the second hand, it's usually around 400 euros or a little bit less, give or take, depending on the region that you buy this lens from. So yeah, overall, I guess now is a good time to lead into the conclusion. So to conclude, I still overall recommend this lens, especially if you're using the Sony system. Of course, if you think that this lens is too big, then maybe it's not for you, but otherwise, for some people, if you can get over the size, because, you know, some people who use 85 also like to shoot street with the 85 and they prefer a much smaller version. But in the same time, this lens, despite being a little bit thick, on the thick side, it is actually not that long, and also it is very, very, very light. So you still can, you know, take it and mount it on your camera all day without feeling that weight around your neck or around your shoulders, or however you hold the camera and the lens. So yeah, there is that. And the image quality is actually really good. The focusing system is really good, and, you know, even though I've only used it mainly just for snapshots here and there, and also photographing my friends and you know, random people as well, I just feel like as an image quality that I get, judging from those, it is very sharp, it is very well controlled, it has really good contrast, there's really little amount of color fringing, even at f1.4, it performs very well for its price range with the high contrast situation. So overall, I think I would definitely recommend this to all of you who are actually looking for a really budget Sony mount 85mm, and you get the benefit of the 1.4 as well. So yeah, that has been a little short video. I hope it helps somewhat. Oh, and the focus breathing is actually not that bad. It's actually there, but it's not that bad for the price. So that's also a bonus as well if you're shooting a lot of videos with this lens or planning to. So yeah, but otherwise, if you need that extra bit of sharpness, the Mark II is there, and the Mark II has a tiny bit better contrast control. But for me personally, for what I do, this is totally fine. And if I'm missing anything, Lightroom can always fix that within less than a few seconds. So yeah, there's that. If you have any questions, any suggestions, feel free to leave them down in the comment section below. If you need a free photography guidebook, it's absolutely for free. It's on my website, so as some of my courses as well, whether you want to watch the paid one or the free one, they're also available on my website as well. The link is also down in the description section below. Otherwise, I thank you all very much for watching. Stay safe, have fun shooting. Till next time, bye for now.